Welcome to Celtic Medicine Stories, a podcast where we explore stories from the old Celtic lands, with the understanding that they carry medicine for us. I'm your host, Kat Horton, and I offer these stories in the spirit of the oral storytelling tradition of the British Isles. That is, they are free and they're open to everyone, always. Although these stories often have come from another time and have evolved through time with the oral storytelling tradition, they are here still for a reason. If you're curious about going deeper with this story, with the images, symbols, characters, landscapes, sounds, whatever it is that's speaking to you from this particular story, then there are some free resources below which will help guide you in that process. The story I'm sharing with you today is the Birth of Taliesin. The word Taliesin means radiant brow in Welsh, and you'll see why at the end of the story. Taliesin is another one of these Celtic figures who crosses back and forth between history and myth. There was a famous Welsh Bard in the 6th century called Taliesin, and there seem to be stories that predate that person and weave throughout the mythic landscape after him. Bards after the 6th century would often compose poetry in the voice of Taliesin, or they were channeling him as they created, however you want to see that process. This is the story of Taliesin's birth. It's quintessential Celtic myth. There's a cauldron, of course, shapeshifting, death and rebirth and initiation, all set in the dramatic Welsh landscape. This story carries a beautiful vibrancy that I can't help feel as I tell it. It's fun and full of mystery. I hope you enjoy this version of the Birth of Taliesin. So as you listen to this story, as with all these Celtic medicine stories, let yourself float. You don't need to pay attention in the way maybe you were asked to do in school. You don't need to try and follow the plot line or the dialogue or anything in particular. In fact, the medicine lies in what you find yourself attending to. So when you let yourself go into that receptive, floaty state and you find your mind wanting to savor an image or a sound or a word, and you find yourself more engaged with that than whatever it is that I'm saying, then notice that. You don't need to analyze it or try and figure it out in that moment, but just notice it, that called your attention, because that's where the medicine lies. Wherever this story interacts with your story is what you're looking for. And I believe this is part of why these stories have been around for so long, is because they each interact with us in some special way. And so as you listen, just let yourself absorb it and notice which parts stick out to you. If you would like to, I invite you to just float back with me through the mists of time. Imagine yourself floating back from these mountains, from this coast, from this continent, eastward, across the Atlantic. Imagine yourself floating through the clouds and crossing over the Atlantic, crossing over Ireland, and there's probably a big bank of fog, and that's how you know this is where we're headed. This is Eryri, Snowdonia, the beautiful mountains of northwest Wales. So as you let yourself float down through the bank of fog, you will notice that somewhere nestled in some of those mountains there is a lake. And by that lake, between the shore of the lake and the forest that goes up the mountains, there is a home. And in that home lives a family. And the one that we're going to talk about this evening, her name is Cerridwen. Some people say that she is a witch. Some people say that she is a sorceress. Some people say she's a healer. Some people say it's best not to give her a label at all because one day you're going to be knocking on her door looking for her medicine. So best just to doff your cap if you see her in the woods and carry on walking. Now, Cerridwen was married to a giant, like literally a giant of a man. And they had 2 children, a girl and a boy. And the girl was beautiful as can be, just fair and sweet and lovely and happy and bubbly and just a lovely little girl. And her brother too, when he was younger, was also a happy little sprite and he would run around the woods. But her brother was Well, how do you say it? He was pretty ugly. People thought he was pretty ugly. In fact, he was very ugly and disfigured. And over time, as people reacted to him in this way with, ugh, ugh, and they didn't want to touch him and they didn't want to talk to him, he felt that, he saw that, he became bitter and resentful and angry and withdrawn. And he became kind of mean because people said mean stuff to him. And Carrie Whidden saw this happening over years. And as his mother, she loved him. She didn't care what he looked like. She loved him. And she could see what was happening to him. And as he grew older, she was concerned for what would happen as he was out in the world and people were treating him like this. And she said to her husband, I have to do something. I don't know what, but I have to do something. And he agreed. And so, as was her way, she took herself back up behind the house and up through the forest and up to the very top of that mountain there. And she took with her nothing. She just took the clothes she was wearing. And she said, I will talk with the spirits. I will talk with the spirit of this mountain and this lake until I know what it is I must do for my beautiful son. And it said she was up there for 3 days and 3 nights. And she didn't eat and she didn't drink. And we don't know what happened. But when she came down, she knew. She knew what she had to do. And she told her husband, I've got it. I've got it. I went up there thinking I was going to come up with some kind of spell to make him beautiful so he didn't have to deal with this being ugly thing. But that's not it. That's not it. I know what I must do. I'm going to make a potion that will give him awan, the inspiration, divine inspiration that will make him a prophetic poet. He will know everything. People will come from miles around to hear what he has to say. This is what I need to do. He said, okay, my love, whatever it is you want to do. And so she said to him, go get that cauldron, the one that's at the bottom of the lake. Go get it. He was a big giant man, so not a problem for him to walk down to the bottom of the lake and scoop up this cauldron that he knew was there, they knew was there, and bring it back up. And he got it all set up on a stand, got a whole big pile of firewood. And Carrie Whidden said to him, I must boil this brew for a year and a day. Gonna need help. And so she started out into the forest with her basket because she knew she had a whole list of plants and leaves and roots and bark and seeds. And there was some insects on that list and various things she was going to throw in this pot over the next year and a day. And as she was out the first day gathering these things, these leaves and barks and roots and things, she came across an old man wandering in the woods, and she saw quickly that he was blind. He was being yet led by a young boy. She looked at them. They seemed to be wandering, searching for something, maybe searching for a place to belong. And she said to them, would you help me for a year and a day, and I will give you a place to sleep and will give you food? They said, oh yes, what do you need us to do? And so she brought them to the hut where the cauldron was set up. And she said to the old man, Morda, I want you to keep feeding this fire. So this cauldron keeps boiling for a year and a day. You got to keep it boiling. He said, okay, I can do that. And she turned to the boy. Guillaume was his name, the fair boy. Guillaume, she turned to him. She said, I want you to stir the cauldron so that nothing ever sticks to the bottom. You got to keep stirring it every day. Multiple times a day. Just keep it moving. And he said, okay, yeah, I can do that. And she said, there's one last thing. Neither of you, nobody in fact, must taste what's in the cauldron because it will instantly turn to poison. Can you agree to that? Oh, yes, no problem. We'll feed the fire, we'll stir it. No problem. You go gather all the herbs and all the things that you need. Okay, so it was done. So she did for a year and a day. Every day she went out in the forest and she gathered what she needed in her basket and she'd bring it back and she'd empty it into the cauldron. Guillaume would stir it and Mordo would keep the fire going. And they did this for a year and a day. And they were getting close to the time. They didn't know exactly when it was going to be ready, but they knew they were getting close. And the cauldron was full. She'd been filling it with roots and twigs and leaves and berries, and there was some frogs and who knows stuff in there. So it was really full and it was boiling. Maud had done a great job. It was boiling really vigorously. And Guillaume Bach was stirring it. And thump, 3 drops of the liquid fell out, jumped out of the cauldron, hit his thumb, put it in his mouth to cool the heat. He was filled instantly with the most luminescent light he'd ever experienced. Everything became light. He felt himself a tiny fractal in this huge ocean of a cosmos that was somehow rushing through him. He didn't know what had happened, but he knew everything in that instant. Everything. He could feel it rushing like electricity through his body as he became part of the cosmos, but still himself, but part of the cosmos. But what is going on? And the next thing he realized is that Carrie Whidden was furious, that she knew, and she was mad as hell. He dropped the stick and he ran out the hut door and he just started to run. He's crashing through the underbrush. He knew she was going to come after him. And indeed, he started to hear her. He started to hear her crashing through the bushes. And he ran and he ran and he ran as fast as his little human boy legs could take him. And he felt her getting close to him. And she was screaming, "I will rip your head off!" She was mad. So he kept running. And he's getting really tired. And he had this image in his mind. He saw the bushes and the tangle of brambles. And he had this image of a hare and how a hare could dart between the branches and the brambles and how a hare was small enough to fit through the undergrowth. And as that image came into his mind, he felt himself shrink down to hair size, and he saw in front of him his hairy paws hitting the ground, and he felt his back legs propelling him forward, and with his whiskers he could sense where the bushes were so he could weave in and out, and he was so much faster as a hare. Ha ha! He said, "Yes, I did it." And he's rushing through the bushes now, quickly, unhindered by the tangle. Yes, I've done it. And then he smelled it. Dog breath breathing on his back legs. Carrie Whidden had turned herself into a dog, into a greyhound, a sleek, fast, pointy-nosed dog that was coming after him under the bushes. He ran as fast as his little hare legs could carry him. And he got through the bushes and he could see the lake ahead of him and the trajectory he's on. He's heading straight for the lake and he can't figure out how to make his hare body change. So he's just heading straight for the lake. And this time, before even the image came to his mind, the sensation came to his body of scales, of a smooth body with fins that could flush through the water, flow with the current. And as he hit that edge of the water, whoosh, he turned into a salmon. And he felt the cool water on his scales and his paws had turned to little fins that let him ever so gracefully glide through the water. Ha ha! I got it this time. As he floated through the lake. And then he felt it. He felt her coming up behind him because he's got these fish eyes. He could see an otter with the sharpest, pointiest teeth and these claws swimming towards him. Fast. She was coming fast. Oh, no. He swam as fast as he could, but she was faster. And she caught him. And she sunk her otter teeth into his backbone while she grabbed the side of his flesh with her claws. She started to bite down on him. And this time, before an image, before it was even a body sensation, a knowing of what he must do. And before he even knew it, he turned into a little songbird and he was so small, he just came out of her claws and he flew off into the sky. I've done it, he said as he flew. He flew up above the lake and started to head out back over land, flying in the updraft of the air that was coming up off the lake. Oh, yeah, he thought. He had a moment to just look around and how fabulous this was to be a winged one, a feathered one, flying up above the forest. And then he heard it. Very sensitive hearing, he realized. Pew! Pew! Up there, he saw the talons of a hawk as it was heading down towards him. He flew as fast as his little wings could take him, and below him he saw a farmyard. Ah, there must be somewhere in there I can hide, he thought, and he started heading towards the farmyard down there. But she was faster, and she came down and sunk her claws into his little tiny feathered body. And this time, the only thing he could do was turn into the smallest thing he could think of, and down there was a pile of grain that the farmer had put out for the chickens. So he turned himself into a little grain of wheat, and he fell out of her talons. He landed in the pile of wheat. And he looked around, and he's like, oh, there's millions of us. She'll never find me here. Ooh, when he breathed a sigh of relief as much as a grain of wheat can do. And he thought he was safe. And all the chickens were scratching around, but there was so much wheat, he wasn't worried about it. But then he saw a big black hen to be coming out of the barn there, bigger than the rest, striding very confidently over to this pile of wheat. Oh no. No, I think that's her. And she came over. She sniffed with those little weird nostrils hens have. I smell you, Gwion back. I smell you, and I'm gonna eat you. And with one peck, that was it. He was gone. Kerriwedden, as a hen strode nonchalantly away from the pile back into the barn, resumed her two-legged form, and just gently meandered home. She said to her husband, I got him. It's done. And within a couple of months, she realized that she was with child. She knew it was him. Ah! It's him! I know it is! Well, I'll just wait for him to be born, and then I'm going to kill him. So she bided her time. And as her belly swelled, her heart softened. She pushed and she pushed and she pushed when it was time for him to be born, and she was so exhausted when he was born. She gathered him to her breast and she said, oh, I gotta sleep. I'll kill you later. I gotta sleep. Oh, she took a nap. And the next day she looked at him. What a beautiful little baby he was. Seemed to be glowing. Like he was just this golden glow. He was just beautiful, and he was just smiley and just lovely, and she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. Ah, I can't do it. So she gathered him up and she rummaged around in her room and she found this old crane skin bag that she had. She put some padding in there for him and she laid him in. She stitched it up. And then she carried this boy in this bag down past the lake into the river that comes out of the lake and goes to the sea. And she knelt down by the banks of that river and she said, whatever will be of you will be. You are no longer mine. And she released him into the river. She turned her back and she walked home. Now, we don't know how long he bobbed around in that river. Some say it was 3 days and 3 nights. Some say it was 9 days. Some say it was 9 months, 9 years, 9 centuries. We don't know, but he bobbed around in that river. And down by the estuary where the river meets the sea, one morning, it was one Beltane morning, there was a young hapless prince called Elphin. And he was just not very lucky. He was always just, things were just going wrong for him. And his parents, the king and queen, were just a bit flummoxed with what to do with this one. It just, things never seemed to work out. So they had sent him to the salmon weir on this day, knowing there's always a huge flush of salmon. He's got to get lucky. He's got to come home with a huge catch and feel successful. They just wanted him to feel successful, because he kept failing. And so Elfin was there. He'd set up the nets in the weir and he'd got everything ready. And so far, nothing. He was like, oh, I'm going to go home empty-handed again. And he was beginning to get a bit stressed out about it. And it was early in the morning. He'd been there since before dawn. And he was looking over the weir to where the river comes in, and he saw this black thing, shiny, bobbing in the river. Well, that's odd. What's that? And it got caught up in the net, so he waded in, and he pulled it out, got back to shore, and he was like shaking it, whatever. He was like, what is this thing? And he got his knife out and he slit open the stitches and opened this bag. And here was this most beautiful baby, glowing baby. And he said, you have such a radiant brow. I'm going to call you Taliesin. In the native tongue of the Britons, Taliesin, radiant brow. And the baby looked right at him and said, I am Taliesin. I sing perfect meter that will last till the world's end. I know why an echo answers again, why liver is bloody, breath is black, and silver shines. I know why a woman loves a man, why milk is white and holly green, ale bitter and ocean brine. How many spears make a confrontation? How many drops a shower of rain? I know why there are scales on fish and black feet on swans. I have been a blue salmon, a dog, a stag, a roebuck on the mountain, a stock, a spade, an axe in hand, a buck, a bull, a stallion. Upon a hill I was grown as grain, reaped and in the oven thrown. After that roasting I fell to the ground, picked up and swallowed by the black hen. In her crop 9 nights lain. I have been dead. I have been alive. I am Taliesin. Wow. Elfin was quite impressed with the poetry coming out of this little tiny baby. He said, wow, well, this is a great find. You are a great find. I'm going to take you home and show you to the king and queen. Taliesin just smiled. And so Elfin gathered him up and he gathered all the men and he went home. And he showed this incredible gift to the king and the queen. And that's how Taliesin became the court bard. Or that's how they say it happened anyway. And so it is. Thank you for listening to this episode of Celtic Medicine Stories. If you want to go deeper, check out my Working with Archetypes free email course. There's a link somewhere in these notes. You'll find it. And feel free to visit on my website, kathoughton.com, KATHOUGHTON.com. I'd love to hear from you. Go well.